Welcome to Umbrella Rebellion. I'm Marcy.
And I'm Dee.
We are finding healing after leaving a cult.
We will be discussing abuse and personal experience with the ATI, IBLP, and fundamental churches.
Trigger warning. This podcast may contain descriptions of various forms of abuse. Please take care for your safety and well-being while you are listening.
If the content becomes too much for you to handle, please turn this off. We hope to expose harmful teachings that lead to and justify abuse,
with the hope that those that are experiencing abuse can find support and escape from it.
Okay, I am live. That took a while to figure out. Welcome in, anyone who might be here. Random Saturday reading of The Body Keeps the Score, I guess, is what we're doing today. Huh? Yeah, thank you. I had my sound engineer check just to make sure my audio was working. Oh, yeah, I wasn't quite prepared for this, and it took a lot longer to set up than I realized. Always does. That ADHD, it really can mess with you. So, we are about to start reading chapter 2 of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. The reason, if you're new here, why I am doing The Body Keeps the Score, I am a survivor of a cult and lots of childhood trauma that I am still discovering to this day was trauma. So, in an effort to work through my trauma, I wanted to start reading some books that might help me. And I'm really terrible at reading for leisure because I read all day long, every day at my job. So I'm usually tired of reading words. But I felt like maybe if I had some people hang out with me and read along with me or hang out with me while I read, I might actually get it done. We have previously, goodness gracious, my brain is very, very tired today. I have 2, I think, episodes previously where we did the intro in chapter 1 of The Body Keeps a Score. You can replay it on YouTube. There should be a playlist. I'll make sure that there's a playlist when I log off here. If you would like to read along with me, hop over to YouTube. I'm going to put the book up on the screen as I read. And I need some water before I start. Yeah. And I need to catch my breath. And I need to collect myself. I needed at least another hour to get myself prepared and be calm before I started this, but it is what it is. I am here and we are going to push through. Probably why I have so much trauma, but that's beside the point, right? Okay. So I'm going to pop this up here on YouTube. If you want to read along again, go pop on over to YouTube on Umbrella Rebellion on all platforms. I'm also on Facebook. So we're just going to dive in right now to chapter 2. Revolutions in Understanding Mind and Brain. The greater the doubt, the greater the awakening. The smaller the doubt, the smaller the awakening. No doubt, no awakening. C.C. Chang, The Practice of Zen. You live through that little piece of time that is yours, but that piece of time is not only your own life, it is the summing up of all the other lives that are simultaneous with yours. What you are is an expression of history. Robert Penn Warren, World Enough and Time. In the late 1960s, during the year off between my first and second years of medical school, I became an accidental witness to a profound transition in the medical approach to mental suffering. I had landed a plum job as an attendant on a research ward at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center, where I was in charge of organizing recreational activities for the patients. Welcome in, welcome in. MMHC had long been considered one of the finest psychiatric hospitals in the country, a jewel in the crown of the Harvard Medical School teaching empire. The goal of the research of my ward was to determine whether psychotherapy or medication was the best way to treat young people who had suffered a first mental breakdown diagnosed as schizophrenia. The talking cure, an offshoot of Freudian psychoanalysis, was still the primary treatment for mental illness at MMHC. The other person that we're waiting to hear from just said that they're back. So you can go. Let's start that paragraph again. The talking cure, an offshoot of Freudian psychoanalysis, was still the primary treatment for mental illness at MMHC. However, in the early 1950s, a group of French scientists had discovered a new compound. Oh, I'm very bad at pronouncing these words sometimes. Chlorpromazine, sold under the brand name Thorazine, that could tranquilize TikTok for informational and educational purposes patients and make them less agitated and delusional. That inspired hope that drugs could be developed to treat serious mental problems such as depression, panic, anxiety, and mania, as well as to manage some of the most disturbing symptoms of schizophrenia. As an attendant, why can't I speak? As an attendant, I had nothing to do with the research aspect of the ward and was never told what treatment any of the patients were receiving. Interesting. They were all close to my age, college students from Harvard, MIT, and Boston University. Some had tried to unalive themselves. I'm changing some words for TikTok and YouTube. Others cut themselves with knives or razor blades. Several had attacked their roommates or had otherwise terrified their parents or friends with their unpredictable, irrational behaviors. My job was to keep them involved in normal activities for college students, such as eating at a local pizza parlor, camping in a nearby state forest, attending Red Sox games, and sailing on the Charles River. Oh, yeah, no, we're not doing that. Goodbye. Sorry, I had to hey! I had to block somebody real quick that was trying to bring us back into the 1950s when it comes to mental health. So, we're not going to entertain that here. So, I just started reading chapter 2. Totally new to the field, I sat in rapt attention during ward meetings, trying to decipher the patient's complicated speech and logic. I also had to learn to deal with their irrational outbursts and terrified withdrawal. One morning, I found a patient standing like a statue in her bedroom with one arm raised in a defensive gesture, her face frozen in fear. She remained there, immobile, for at least 12 hours. The doctors gave me the name for her condition, catatonia, but even the textbooks I consulted didn't tell me what could be done about it. We just let it run its course. Trauma before dawn. I spent many nights and weekends on the unit, which exposed me to things the doctors never saw during their brief visits. Wouldn't that be crazy if that doctors actually saw what was happening? When patients could not sleep, They often wandered in their tightly wrapped bathrobes into the darkened nursing station to talk. The quiet of the night seemed to help them open up, and they told me stories about having been hit, assaulted, molested, often by their own parents, sometimes by relatives, classmates, or neighbors. They shared memories of lying in bed at night, helpless and terrified, hearing their mother being abused by their father or boyfriend, hearing their parents yell horrible threats at each other, hearing the sounds of furniture breaking. Others told me about fathers who came home drunk, hearing their footsteps on the landing and how they waited for them to come in, pull them out of bed, and punish them for some imagined offense. Several of the women recalled laying awake motionless, waiting for the inevitable, a brother or father coming in to molest them. During morning rounds, the young doctors presented their cases to their supervisors, a ritual that the ward attendants were allowed to observe in silence. They rarely mentioned stories like the ones I'd heard. However, many later studies have confirmed the relevance of those midnight confessions. We now know that more than half the people who seek psychiatric care have been assaulted, abandoned, neglected, or even forcibly put upon in a intimate nature as children, or have witnessed violence in their families. By such experiences seem to be off the table during rounds. But such experiences seem to be off the table during rounds. I was often surprised by the dispassionate way patients' symptoms were discussed and by how much time was spent on trying to manage their suicidal, unaliving thoughts and self destructive behaviors rather than on understanding the possible cause of their despair and helplessness. I was also struck by how little attention was paid to their accomplishments. Yes? Yeah. Um, that first word,
Well, yes, but it's part of the lyrics.
I understand. I hope it is conveyed in a way that is innocent, but that is beautiful, and I'm so proud of you. Sorry. My son was showing me something he created to ask a girl at school to the HOCO. So his first HOCO invitation or asking someone to the HOCO. I don't know. It's he used a song that she liked, and so one of the words in there was a little above what I think stage they're at, but if it's received the way it's meant to, I guess it's okay, but it's gonna be in front of her mom, so we'll see how it goes. But it was cute. Oh man. 14. 14. 14. So, but he's my good one. He'll respect boundaries and he'll yeah. I'm sorry. I'm having a little bit mom moment. Whew. My last one. My last one. Doing the dating thing. It's new. Yeah, okay. Anyway, we're going to go back to reading about trauma. I'm going to forget that it just happened. Yes, he's my baby. Um, okay. Let's go back a little bit so I can get back on track. I was often surprised by the dispassionate way patients' symptoms were discussed and by how much time was spent on trying to manage their unaliving thoughts and self-destructive behaviors, rather than on understanding the possible causes of their despair and helplessness. I was also struck by how little attention was paid to their accomplishments and aspirations, whom they whom they cared for, loved, or hated, what motivated and engaged them, what kept them stuck, and what made them feel at peace, the ecology of their lives. A few years later, as a young doctor, I was confronted with an especially stark example of the medical model in action. I was then moonlighting at a Catholic hospital doing physical examinations on women who'd been admitted to receive electroshock treatment for depression. Being my curious immigrant self, I'd look up from their charts and ask them about their lives. Many of them spilled out stories about painful marriages, difficult children, and guilt over seeking medical care as a woman. Abortions, whatever. Abortions. Whatever you say to make it TikTok and YouTube friendly. As they spoke, they visibly brightened, often thanked me effusively for listening to them. Some of them wondered if they really still needed electroshock after having gotten so much off their chest. Oh, wow. That's crazy. Smith Morton. Okay. Thank you. I'm really happy for you, but you're distracting me from my goal here. I always felt sad at the end of those meetings, knowing that the treatments that would be administered the following morning would erase all memory of our conversation. Oh, wow. That's sad. It did not last. I did not last long in that job. I can only imagine. Wow. On my days off from the ward, well, friend, why don't you just stay here and maybe this book will help you recover from what you're experiencing, or maybe give you some insight on what's going on. Yeah, definitely a lot of anxiety. I agree. On my days off from the ward at MMHC, I often went to Countway Library of Medicine to learn about the patients I was supposed to help. On Saturday afternoon, I came across a I can't say this word. I don't know why. Treatise? I don't know how to pronounce it for some reason. That is still revered today. Eugene Bueller's 1911 textbook, Dementia Praecox. Bueller's observations were fascinating, and here are his observations. Among schizophrenic body hallucinations, the smexual ones are by far the most frequent and the most important. All the raptures and joys of normal and abnormal smexual satisfaction are experienced by these patients, but even more frequently, every obscene and disgusting practice which the most extravagant fantasy can conjure up. Male patients have their can I say this on TikTok and YouTube? Swimmers drawn off, painful erections are stimulated. The women patients are raped, and injured in a most devilish way. In spite of, hold on, change the page. In spite of the symbolic meaning of many hallucinations, the majority of them correspond to real sensations. Wild. Thank you. This made me wonder, our patients had hallucinations. The doctors routinely asked about them and noted them as signs of how disturbed the patients were. But if the stories I'd heard in the wee hours were true, could it be that these hallucinations were in fact the fragmented memories of real experiences? Were hallucinations just the concoctions of sick brains? Could people make up physical sensations they had never experienced? One would wonder. Was there a clear line between creativity and pathological imagination? Between memory and imagination? These questions remain unanswered to this day. But research has shown, and this today, I forget when this was published, but it's been a while. But research has shown that people who've been abused as children often feel sensations such as abdominal pain that have no obvious physical cause. Oh, Interesting. They hear voices warning of danger or accusing them of heinous crimes. There was no question that many patients on the ward engaged in violent, bizarre, and self destructive behaviors, particularly when they felt frustrated, thwarted, or misunderstood. They threw temper tantrums, hurled plates, smashed windows, and cut themselves with shards of glass. At the time, I had no idea why some might react to a simple request, let me clean that goop out of your hair, with rage or terror. Right? Definitely wild. So we're gonna go back to remind me, Jenny, if I forget. I want to go back to the abdominal pain, but let's finish a little bit more here. I usually followed the lead of the experienced nurses who signaled when to back off, or if that did not work, to restrain a patient. I was surprised and alarmed by the satisfaction I sometimes felt after I'd wrestled a patient to the floor so a nurse could give an injection, and I gradually realized how much of our professional training was geared to help us stay in control in the face of terrifying and confusing realities. Wow. So they were experiencing trauma, so because these other people were traumatized, and they got relief from experiencing that by controlling these people and getting control of the environment. Makes makes me realize that our mental health has not progressed the way it should have in the last couple of decades. Yeah, right? Sylvia was a gorgeous 19-year-old Boston University student who usually sat alone in the corner of the ward, looking frightened to death and virtually mute, but whose reputation as the girlfriend of an important Boston mafioso gave her an aura of mystery. After she refused to eat for more than a week and rapidly started to lose weight, the doctors decided to force feed her. It took 3 of us to hold her down, another to push the rubber feeding tube down her throat, and a nurse to pour the liquid nutrients into her stomach. God, that's torture. Later, during a midnight confession, Sylvia spoke timidly and hesitantly about her childhood sexual abuse by her brother and uncle. I realized that our display of caring must have felt to her much like the multiple person grape. This experience and others like it helped me formulate this rule for my students. If you do something to a patient that you would not do to your friends or children, consider whether you are unwittingly replicating a trauma from the patient's past. Holy fuck. Go figure. Oh, I mean, thank God for doctors who like started to put shit through in their brain and like, this isn't right. This isn't right. This isn't right. I wish more would do that because we are so far from being in the best place when it comes to mental health care. In my role as reaction leader, I noticed reaction leader. What a title. I noticed other things. As a group, the patients were strikingly blah, 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 blah. As a group, the patients were strikingly clumsy and physically uncoordinated. When we went camping, most of them stood helplessly by as I pitched the tents. We almost capsized one in a squall on the Charles River because they huddled rigidly in the lee, unable to grasp that they needed to shift position to balance the boat. Oh, we almost capsized once, not one. Okay. It was like, what? We went from tents to boats? Like, I'm so confused. Another characteristic they shared was that even their most relaxed conversations seemed stilted, lacking the natural flow of gestures and facial expressions that are typical among friends. The relevance of these observations became clear only after I'd met the body-based therapist Peter Levine, and Pat Ogden. In later chapters, I'll have to blah, 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 blah. In later chapters, I'll have a lot to say about how trauma is held in people's bodies. So, story time. When I was in 8th grade, there were 20 some odd girls and 3 boys in my class. There was a falling out with one of my friends and resulted in me being ostracized by the whole entire class. I had no friends. I would sit alone at lunch, and often during the day in a particular class, because of the way that I had to move through the class or who I was in class with, I would go down to the office and complain of a stomachache. It was probably anxiety looking back, but it was also something they couldn't prove I didn't have, so I could go home and avoid the bullying. Recently, I had a recovered childhood memory, and I wonder if some of my stomach pains as a child was due to anxiety and or things that I experienced that I had forgotten about. Just one of those, another thing to write down to talk to my therapist about. Whew. So reading about that kind of brought me back to 8th grade when I was dealing with that bully and how hard it was for me to even like know what to say or do or who to talk to. And I felt like I had no one. I felt like there was nobody that would stop it, which was what transitioned me from going to a Catholic all girls high school for high school to homeschooling and delving into the cult war. So, if my childhood bully ever sees this, you kind of pushed me into a cult, thank you. No, it's not all on them. My family definitely helped with that too. But I wonder if I hadn't been so isolated and bullied in my 8th grade year, would I have gone to the Catholic high school that I was expecting to go to or chose a different one where I chose the one school that no one from that class was going to because I was like, no, not doing this. But had I chose the school I wanted to go to, a few people would have been there. And I think my life might have been a little bit different, but never know. It is what it is now. It brought me to where I'm at now, and I'm happy. So there's that. All right, let's go on to the next section. Anybody have any questions or comments so far before we move on? All right, nope. But it's crazy how the body holds on to traumas. It does. And as I'm reading this book, I am definitely having a visceral reaction to talking about these things. And it's kind of interesting, right? Like I can feel the anxiety rising, I can feel the knot in my stomach, I can feel the tightness in my chest. And, you know, I am having heart issues and stuff, but it's definitely related. So, this would be a good time to say if you are having trouble handling listening to this, it's on YouTube. It will be on YouTube when we are done. You can always come back and listen to the rest. Take care of yourself and don't push yourself when it comes to processing trauma. All right. Making sense of suffering. After my year on the research ward, I resumed medical school and then, as a newly minted MD, returned to MMHC to be trained as a psychiatrist, a program to which I was thrilled to be accepted. Many famous psychiatrists had trained there, including Eric Kandel, who later won the Nobel Peace Prize in Psychology and Medicine. Alan Hobson discovered the brain cells responsible for generation of dreams in a lab in the hospital basement while I trained there, and the first studies on the chemical underpinnings of depression were also conducted at MMHC. But for many of us residents, the greatest draw was the patients. We spent 6 hours each day with them, and they met as a group with senior psychiatrists to share our observation. And we met and then met as a group with senior psychiatrists to share our observations, pose our questions, and compete to make the wittiest remarks. That's funny, right? Like it's competition based still, but also in the light of a mental health facility. It's kind of a weird contradiction of like positions, right? Like you're above these patients like as a resident, but you're also below your psychiatrist, and you're trying to volley for, seniority or attention or recognition. That's kind of funny. Our great teacher, Elvin Simrad, actively discouraged us from reading psychiatry textbooks during our first year. That's interesting. This intellectual starvation diet may account for the fact that most of us later become voracious readers and prolific writers. Simrad did not want our perceptions of reality to become obscured by the pseudo certainties of psychiatric diagnoses. I remember asking him once, "What would you call this patient, schizophrenic or schizoaffective?" He paused and stroked his skin, apparently in deep thought. "I think I'd call him Michael McIntyre," he replied. Simrad taught us that most human suffering is related to love and loss, and the job of therapists is to help people acknowledge, experience, and bear the reality of life. With all its pleasures and heartbreak, the greatest sources of our suffering are with the lies we tell ourselves, end quote. He'd say, urging us to be honest with ourselves about every facet of our experience. He often said that people can never get better without knowing what they know and feeling what they feel. Interesting. I remember being surprised to hear this distinguished old Harvard professor confess how comforted he was to feel his wife's bum against him as he fell asleep at night. By disclosing such simple human needs in himself, he helped us recognize how basic they were to our lives. Failure to attend to them results in a sustained existence, no matter how lofty our thoughts and worldly accomplishments. Healing, he told us, depended on experiential knowledge. You can be fully in charge of your life only if you can acknowledge the reality of your body in all its visceral dimensions. That's interesting. So it takes one teacher with insight and one student with a passion for understanding to change direction of a whole entire specialty. I mean, like, not like these two people are the only ones that did it, but like you can see how that mentality was shifting from what the mentality of the mental health spaces were. Lock them up and throw away the key and forget them. They're ruined people. They're broken. They're never going to be beneficial to society kind of thoughts. And now it's like, oh, well, they're just broken people. Let's help fix them and piece them back together and show them how to do it better. Like it's a whole entire shift in the way that they were thinking back then. They're traumatized people. Exactly. Our profession, however, was moving in a different direction. In 1968, the American Journal of Psychiatry had published the results of the study from the ward where I'd been an attendant. They showed unequivocally that schizophrenic patients who received drugs alone had a better outcome than those who talked 3 times a week with the best therapist in Boston. This study was one of the many milestones on a road that gradually changed how medicine and psychiatry approached psychological problems. From infinitely variable expressions of intolerable feelings and relationships to a brain disease model of discrete disorders. Absolutely. There's so much to learn still. The way medicine approaches human suffering has always been determined by the technology available at any given time. How true is that? Before the Enlightenment, aberrations in behavior were ascribed to God, sin, magic, witches, and evil spirits. That's a whole sentence. I thought it was going to be more thought. Before the Enlightenment, aberrations in behavior were ascribed to God, sin, magic, witches, and evil spirits. It was only in the 19th century that scientists in France and Germany began to investigate behavior as an adaptation of the complexities of the world. Now a new paradigm was emerging. Anger, lust, pride, greed, avarice, and sloth, as well as other problems we humans have always struggled to manage, were recast as disorders. They could be fixed by the administration of appropriate chemicals. Many psychiatrists were relieved and delighted to become real scientists, just like their med school classmates who had laboratories, animal experience, expensive equipment, and complicated diagnostic tests, and set aside the woolly-headed theories of philosophers like Freud and Jung. A major textbook of psychiatry went so far as to state the cause of mental illness is now considered an aberration of the brain, a chemical imbalance. Like my colleagues, I eagerly embraced the pharmacological revolution. In 1973, I became the first chief resident in psychopharmacology at MMHC. I'm wearing a heart monitor. I'm getting out of breath. I have to notate this. So, hold on. I don't remember what I was doing then. It is 2:40 p.m. and we're having shortness of breath. And I am reading out loud. Too funny. All right. Give me a second to catch my breath. I may also have been the first psychiatrist in Boston, to administer lithium to a manic depressive patient. I'd read about John Cade's work with lithium in Australia, and I received permission from a hospital committee to try it. On lithium, a woman who had been manic every May for the past 35 years and unaliving thoughts depressed every November stopped cycling and remained stable for the 3 years she was under my care. Hey, Gina. I was also part of the first U.S. research team to test the antipsychotic Clozaril on chronic patients who were warehoused in the back wards of the old insane asylums. Some of their responses were miraculous. I'm having a hard time reading. People who have spent much of their lives locked in their own separate, terrifying realities were now able to return to their families and communities. Patients mired in darkness and despair started to respond to the beauty of human contact and the pleasures of work and play. These amazing results made us optimistic that we could finally conquer human misery. Human misery, same thing, right? Antipsychotic drugs were a major factor in reducing the number of people living in mental hospitals in the United States from over 500,000 in 1955 to fewer than 100,000 in 1996. That's huge. For people today who did not know the world before the advent of these treatments, the change is almost unimaginable. As a first-year medical student, I visited Kankakee State Hospital in Illinois, and saw a burly ward attendant horse down dozens of filthy. Wait, I'm confused. Okay, let's start that over. As a first-year medical student, I visited Kankakee State Hospital in Illinois and saw a burly ward attendant hose down dozens of filthy, naked, incoherent patients in an unfurnished day room supplied with gutters for runoff water. This memory now seems more like a nightmare than like something I witnessed with my own eyes. Yeah, that seems traumatizing. My first job after finishing my residency in 1974 was a second to last director of a once venerable institution, the Boston State Hospital, which had formerly housed thousands of patients and been spread over hundreds of acres with dozens of buildings, including greenhouses, gardens, and workshops, most of them by then in ruins. During my time there, patients were gradually dispersed into the community, the blanket term for the anonymous shelters and nursing homes where most of them ended up. Ironically, the hospital was started as an asylum, a word meaning sanctuary, that gradually took on a sinister connotation. Yes, because when humans have control over other humans who are vulnerable, nothing bad ever happens. It actually did offer a sheltered community where everybody knew the patient's names and idiosyncrasies. In 1979, shortly after I went to work at the VA, the Boston State Hospital's gates were permanently locked and it became a ghost town. During my time at Boston State, I continued to work in the MMHC psychopharmacology lab, which is now focused on another direction for research. In the 1960s, scientists at the National Institutes of Health had begun to develop techniques for isolating and measuring hormones and neurotransmitters in blood and the brain. Neurotransmitters are Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that carry information from neuron to neuron, enabling us to engage effectively with the world. Now that scientists were finding evidence that abnormal levels of norepinephrine were associated with depression and of dopamine with schizophrenia, there was hope that we could develop drugs that target specific brain abnormalities. That hope was never fully realized. But our efforts to measure how drugs could affect mental symptoms led to another profound change in the profession. Researchers' need for a precise and systemic way to communicate their findings resulted in the development of the so-called research diagnostic criteria, to which I contributed as a lowly research assistant. These eventually became the basis for the first systemic system to diagnose psychiatric problems. The American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM, which is commonly referred to as the Bible of Psychiatry. The foreword to the landmark 1980 DSM-3 was appropriately modest and acknowledged that the diagnostic system was imprecise, so imprecise that it never should be used for forensic or insurance purposes. As we will see, that modesty was tragically short-lived. That is interesting because when Dobson passed, he's a psychiatrist. He was a board-certified psychiatrist. My sister and I did a little bit of digging, and he stopped practicing psychiatry when the DSM either the DSM-3 or the DSM-4 came out. I think it might have been the 3. That was 1980, probably the 3. And in the DSM-3 was when homosexuality was no longer classified as a mental disorder. I'm going to have to recheck that information, but that's what I recall at this moment. So, if anybody has a correction to that on YouTube or Facebook, leave it in the comments. But that was what we had found, and I do intend to do a episode eventually on his history as a psychiatrist and what made him switch from psychiatry to behavior science of children in religion. Weird. Okay, I am getting out of breath. I don't think I can read anymore. I need to pause here, but if you have any questions or comments about what we've already read, go ahead and we can talk about it a little bit. It'll give me a chance to catch my breath, drink some water, and wait for y'all to comment. Which is just you, Jenny, because you're the only one interacting. But that's okay. This was a little unplanned. Oh, absolutely. I'm thinking that definitely need to do this every Saturday. And I'm thinking the 2 o'clock hour will be best, depending on like my son's going to be doing soccer soon, so not sure. I'll have to get the soccer schedule, but I think most of his games are during the week. So, but if you want to get a physical copy to follow along with us, you can go to my last video that I posted about the Culty Book Club today, and there is a link to purchase a book. And if you don't want to spend money, look it up in your library. Get a copy or, whatnot. Or you just watch it on YouTube because it's up there while I'm reading it. So, all right. Oh, so how is your podcast going, Jenny? If y'all are not aware, my friend Jenny, that I met here on TikTok, has a podcast called Unholier. I was a guest on it a couple months ago, and I am far behind on her episodes, and I really need to catch up. It's going good. I'm glad. I'm glad. I saw some of the teasers for the latest episode, and I'm excited about it. Did that drop yet? Did it drop today? Is that what y'all do every Saturday? I don't remember. I'm so bad at memory. Plus, I've had a lot of trauma stuff going on this week, so oh, I'll have to do a lot of research, so that'll be a while. And I know David wants me on his other new podcast, and I'm like, okay, I'll schedule it in. And then I have another podcast for that reached out to me that wanted me on every Monday at midnight. Okay. So every Monday at midnight, if you're following Unholier Podcast, a new episode drops. And so it's more on the chronic illness and being a mama of, either chronically ill or special needs children. And so I'll be on that sometime. All platforms, including YouTube. Yep. So I love watching podcasts on YouTube. So I need to start just having them run in the background while I'm doing whatever. But also for Umbrella Rebellion, Monday, a new episode's coming out. So I am going to be working the rest of today and tomorrow on getting what I've already recorded for the men's manual pushed out and rescheduled. And then I will be working on figuring out the new format and the next section, which is finally not the intro. Like, we've been on this intro for 12 weeks. This is insane. So I'm feeling a lot better than I did a couple weeks ago. Everything has come back. My body does not realize how sick I am, apparently. We still don't know what's wrong with me, but hopefully this heart monitor and the brain MRI next Friday will help us. It's actually going to be going on a shelf in my background for my podcast whenever I can get out of bed and sit in a chair for a while. It will definitely be going in the background on a bookshelf because right now I just have them on my dresser and my room is a mess and so so unorganized. I need to get some bookshelves up. I have a ton of workbooks that I need, work books that I need to put up above my place I work, the desk. Yeah, that thing. Whoo, brain. And then the next to it, I'm going to have that's my podcast corner, and I'm going to have some bookshelves with the the lovely red-binded books, red and dark brown or whatever they are. So funny that he used like maroon as his color for his books, and he was so against red. Wild. Just wild. But yeah. Oh, and I actually recently dropped the episode on hair and appearance standards, which is also wild. And I knew it was bad, but oh my goodness, it was so bad. So bad. I could not. Rules for thee, not for me. That is Bill Gothard and every IFB pastor ever. I don't have to live by the rules I tell you to live by. And they wonder why we're insane. All right, guys. It's been lovely hanging out with the people who were able to attend. Mark your calendars next Saturday. I'm gonna shoot for 2. I have to check my calendar and make sure we have no conflicting things. And I'm really enjoying getting back into this. So I appreciate y'all for being here. If you're watching on the rewatch, words are hard, man. If you're rewatching on the YouTubes, give it a thumbs up, like it, comment, share, subscribe, all the things. And I will see you next time. But before I go, I just want to tell you, if somebody hasn't told you today or ever, I am so proud of you. Come on, mouse. Find the button. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Oh, wrong way. Apparently, I can't function. I can't. Come here. There we go. Use what? This thing. This thing. It won't go. Where are you? There we go. Double screen.